Douglas. I think you're back in Israel. Is that right?
Yes, I'm in Israel tonight, yeah.
Today it was a sea of other stories have come out in the last few days, which have been concerning, I think. For anyone who, like me, believes that Israel has not just a moral duty to defend itself, but has a fundamental right to do so after what happened on October the 7th. And I've said that clearly from the start. It's always been, for me, the issue of proportionality. And it seems that in the last few days, there have been a number of incidents which really question whether Israel is being precise, as it says it is, or indiscriminate. And I would cite the killing of the 3 hostages. I would cite the killing of the 2 women outside the Catholic Church. I would cite the President of the United States saying that they're using indiscriminate bombing, and so on. Do you, Douglas, notwithstanding your full throttle support of Israel, does anything that's been happening make you think Israel needs to execute this war differently?
No, and I think that most of the people who think they know how to execute this war have never executed a war. Indeed, most people who think they know how the IDF should be running this conflict have never been near a conflict. I'm in Israel tonight. I was in Gaza again yesterday. And the examples that you give, by the way, Piers, I don't see why they show any need to prosecute the war itself differently. I mean, just to take one of them, the first example you give, the absolutely tragic, awful shooting of these 3 hostages as they were coming out. But, you know, some of the spin that's been put on that in the world, apart from the glee, of course, that Israel's enemies can't help expressing, some of the spin on that is almost as if it shows the IDF is sort of so brutal that it even kills Hamas hostages who are Israeli. I just think this is another example of the international media and others just having this astounding lack of empathy for the Israeli people. Can you imagine what it was like for those soldiers who were in Gaza, knowing that at any point there were snipers, there are booby traps everywhere, people coming out of tunnels that they've built at British and American taxpayer expenses and attacking them? Can you imagine what it was like for the soldiers who, in that terrible moment, made the life-changing mistake of shooting 3 people who turned out to be Hamas hostages?
But why would they? But Douglas, on that, why would they shoot anyone who was shirtless and waving an SOS flag? I mean, why would whoever they were, whether they were Israeli hostages or whether they thought they were Palestinians, why would anyone shoot anyone who comes out like that? That's my point.
That'll be a matter for the inquiry into it. But, look, it's hardly as if they'd have wanted to have done that. What this demonstrates is, in this incredibly close conflict, in a heavily built-up area, with people coming out from all sides, firing, shooting, detonating, people make mistakes. Of course they do. That's just a human reality of war, horrible as it is. I don't think it shows in any way that Israel is prosecuting this war wrongly. As for the main issue of the war, is to destroy Hamas. No Israeli of left or right or center believes anymore after October the 7th that they can live beside Hamas. Hamas has been given the statelet of Gaza. It was given it in 2006, voted in, then killed their fellow Palestinians in a coup, killed Fatah rivals, and they've run the Gaza for almost 18 years now. And they've produced a new generation of people whose main aim in life, it seems, according to their textbooks and their classes, is to regard Jews as enemies who should be killed. This is just an unbelievable waste, a waste of life on every side. But apart from anything else, a waste of those Palestinian lives, of children who grew up under Hamas's rule, if you can call it that, who have been indoctrinated into becoming sociopaths by a psychopathic terror organization, Hamas.
All right, Cenk, you've been listening to that.
So Douglas's opening statement to Piers Morgan's question, basically, which was, do you think that Israel, as they say, are trying to do everything in their power to prevent casualties of civilians when they're doing their bombing raids or when they're going house to house trying to look for Hamas, terrorists or Hamas sympathizers? And then Piers asked that question to Doug. Well, why is it that they shot, people coming out of a building that didn't have a shirt on and were holding up an SOS sign or a surrender sign, something like that. And Doug countered and said, you know what? Mistakes happen in war. And there would be an inquiry as to what happened. I mean, I don't know what else, but to say that because of that incident, or there was another incident that Piers cited, a couple of women were killed outside a church. Collateral damage is just one of the unfortunate, horrific tragedies that occurs in any type of a setting where you've got, warring factions. And it's going to happen on the side that started the incursion and started the bombings or the terrorist activities or the raids that initiated the the first murders that occurred on October 7th, and then you're going to have the retaliation. And unfortunately, there's collateral damage. Now, basically, what they're trying to do is that many in the Western newspapers, though they're siding with the pro-Palestinian side, they're going to try to spin this in their way, saying that this is disproportionate attacks. Look at the Israelis, they're shooting everybody. And they're going to try to get their narrative out. Israel's going to try to put their narrative out. Douglas is defending their side. Cenk the Jenk is going to defend the other side. Let's get to Cenk's response. Before we do, I want to let you know that you're watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I'm your host, Dr. Nasir, and that's what we have on tap for you today. This fiery debate that's just it's going to get explosive, folks. You know it. When you put Cenk in a room, it gets bombastic, right? So let's get to Cenk's response right now.
Thing that Douglas said that you agree with?
No, nothing.
Not even about the way Hamas has presided over Gaza in the last 18 years.
Yeah. So that's a weapon of mass distraction. It's Israel doing genocide on the Palestinians right now. And there's IDF soldiers singing and in video that the IDF has confirmed about how they're going to wipe out the seed of Amalek. That is a verse in the old Hebrew Bible that talks about exterminating Amalek. So they're talking about genocide against Palestinians. Benjamin Netanyahu has also talked about wiping out Amalek. These are open calls for genocide. What I find stunning, Douglas mentioned stunning lack of empathy. There's 20,000 dead people in Palestine right now in Gaza. Over 8,000 of them are children. When 36 Israeli children were killed by Hamas, the world cried out, and I was brokenhearted over it. 36 poor kids dead in Israel. Now there's over 8,000 dead kids in Gaza. You want to talk about a stunning lack of empathy. 6,400 women slaughtered in Gaza. You want to talk about terrorism? They're dropping unguided bombs, 2,000-pound bombs. Every one of those bombs is an act of terrorism. And the stunning lack of empathy towards Palestinian lives is disgusting. But I want to be clear, it is not shared by all Israelis. The dad of one of the hostages who was killed went on Israeli television and said, "Stop killing them." And he didn't mean the hostages. He meant the Palestinians.
All right, but Jake, let me just jump in. But before I go back to Douglas' response to this.
Let me reply to that, Piers.
Yeah, I will let you reply to that. On this issue of genocide, do you accept, though, that Hamas's whole raison d'etre when it comes to Israel is genocide? They want to eradicate Israel and kill as many Jews as they can. I mean, they've made no secret of this.
Yeah, so this is really important. So I have no sympathy for Hamas. So I'm not interested in defending Hamas. I think that's nothing but a distraction. Because right now they're not fighting Hamas. They're just killing Palestinian
civilians. Well, they're also killing Hamas terrorists. They are. I mean, they're killing thousands of them.
Barely. No, wait a minute. Barely. But let's go to your main point, okay? So the main point is, well, Hamas threatens X, Y, and Z and has killed 1,200 people on October 7th. So that is why we have to all worry about what Hamas might do in regards to trying to... Hold on, let me finish the point. Let me finish the point. at what they might do if they had infinite power, the kind of power that Israel has. Meanwhile, Israel is actually doing the genocide, is actually preventing a Palestinian state and saying you are not allowed to exist, and if you dare try to exist, we'll kill 20,000 of your children and women.
All right, Douglas, respond to that.
So there you have Cenk's response in typical Cenk the Jenk style, bloviating, right at you. You know, I mean, just like basically, like I said, like a sledgehammer, you know, just pounding away. And he just, you know, goes right after you, goes right after the question, and just lays it out there with emotion and passion. And I just want to make a few points about what Cenk was talking about. Again, he's going after the emotional response from people, citing these statistics coming out of Gaza from Hamas as to the number of civilian casualties and children casualties as well, the injury toll, the death toll. And yes, that tugs at everybody's heartstrings when you hear somebody saying 8,000 children. One child dying is way too many, let alone 8,000. The problem is, are we to believe the numbers that Hamas is telling? The numbers, are they being hyperinflated? Now, people could ask and say, well, Dr. Nasir, so what if they hyperinflate them? A death is a death. That is true. But if I'm just saying that if you had 15 or 20 or 100 or 1,000 deaths, and somebody says that 20,000 died, and everybody assumes that, wow, 20,000, that's going to cause an emotional response from people. That's just human nature. And then when Douglas asks him and says, well, what about the Hamas charter? What about what Hamas says they want to do to eradicate Israel, to a genocide of the Jewish state, the Jewish nation? Well, Cenk comes back basically and says they don't have that kind of power, and they just might do it. Listen, you don't have to perpetrate an act of violence that's going to, do something to tens of thousands of people or hundreds of thousands of people. You can do smaller terrorist attacks that take out 12, 1,500, a few thousand, and do 10 or 12, 15 or 20 of those and achieve the same effect. In fact, that will strike more terror because people are going to say, we can't stop this happening all around us, rather than hopping at one time. And so basically, I mean, that's sort of, Cenk's position is coming at that Israel is the one that's committing genocide. They're the ones that are, because they've got they've got unabashed power to do whatever the heck that they want, and they are doing it disproportionately to the Palestinian people, and that's what's happening. Anyways, let's see what Doug's response is to this.
Several things. First of all, anyone who uses the term genocide in this context simply doesn't know what they're talking about, or is a malevolent actor. I don't know if Mr. Uyghur's traveled at all in his life, how far he's traveled, how many conflicts he's seen, but I'd have guessed none. And you clearly know nothing about this particular conflict, and you've obviously seen none of it. The genocide that you describe is such a smear and a libel against the Jewish state. If Israel wanted to commit genocide, I'm sure it could, but it doesn't. It doesn't remotely want to. And people like you and other pro-Palestinian propagandists have spent years claiming that Israel is committing genocide in the Gaza. By the way, the weirdest thing about this claim is that the population of the Gaza has grown by 1 million in the last 15 or so years. So if Israel was trying to carry out a genocide, it's either the worst perpetrator of genocide ever or uniquely poor at performing that task. None of the stats support that ridiculous claim. And it's such a weird smear and a libel of Israel. Secondly, of course, you've just rattled off Hamas figures, as everyone of your kind always does. Thirdly, you said that the world cried. You said that the people like you who cover for the Palestinian extremists. Thirdly, you said that the world cried out for the 36 Israeli dead children. No, they didn't. And you know that very well. You know that very well. If you put up a poster to a missing dog in any Western city, that poster stays up. In city after city in America, posters of abducted Jewish children, including a 10-month-old baby, were put up and were ripped down by people who have been indoctrinated into hate of Jews. Nobody would rip down the poster of a missing dog, but from Dublin to Berkeley, they ripped down posters of abducted Jewish children. So no, I don't think there was
Douglas,
very
let me
much
put
care
this to you.
for that
Let me
around
put
the
this to you,
world.
Douglas.
Let me make two other very quick points. Firstly, you said what Hamas might do, as if it was some kind of hypothetical. Hamas showed what they do, what they want to do. It showed it on October the 7th, and its leadership, as I'm sure you very well know, said that they would like to repeat that again and again until they have got rid of every Jew. So, I don't know. I would trust Hamas's word on that rather than your interpretation of what you think they mean when they say that, and your generous interpretation of what you think that means. And finally, as for preventing a Palestinian state, it is nonsense that the Israelis have prevented a Palestinian state. They gave the Gazans a Palestinian state in 2005. They gave them a Palestinian state in 2005 when every Jewish person was ripped from their homes in the Gaza by IDF soldiers. And the Palestinian people were given a state. And what did they do? They voted in Hamas, who then killed their fellow Palestinians, never had another election, and used all the billions of dollars of taxpayer funds from the US, UK, and Europe to build terror tunnels and to enrich themselves so they could live the life of luxury in Qatar. Again and again, the reason there is not a Palestinian state is because the Palestinian leadership doesn't want one.
Okay, Douglas,
didn't want one in 1947, it preferred war, and it doesn't want one now.
Douglas, let me put one point to you.
Boy, oh boy, oh boy. Doug does it his way, Cenk does it his way. There are some subtleties in the way that these two counterattack when they're debating, discussing. As you notice, Cenk goes after somebody with a freaking sledgehammer and just pounds and pounds and pounds. And after the sledgehammer is done, he takes his foot and he stomps and stomps and stomps. Once he's done with that, he takes a huge boulder and crashes it down on it. That's Cenk style, just brute force, brawn. Doug comes after you, surgical, making those cuts and just literally slicing his opponent, down, slicing into pieces, basically, taking it apart at the seams and doing it with like a velvet glove, but with the power of a sledgehammer. And after a while you go, God, that hurt. What was that? And then you're looking at it and going, it was just that's a piece of velvet. But the power that he uses when Doug, goes after his opponent. Now, there's a few other things that I wanted to mention in terms of this. And one of the things is that when Douglas talks about that Cenk's interpretation of what Hamas wants to do, that they might want to attack. They might want to eradicate the Jews. No, they've shown over and over and over again, Hamas, that they want to eradicate the Jewish people. They want to eradicate the state of Israel. They want to wipe it off the face of the earth. It's in their charter. It's not a question of might. They've done it. October 7th was, what else do you want to need? But, what you saw on October 7th. And then finally, what I'd like to say in terms of this is that when Douglas was talking about that, the posters of children that were basically taken as hostage were being ripped apart, ripped off of telephone poles, ripped off of buildings. These photos of these children that were missing, Israeli children, and it was being done by pro-Palestinian propagandists and pro-Palestinian supporters. Why? Why was that being done? What type of a look does that give to the pro-Palestinian side? And as Doug rightly pointed out, if that was a dog that was missing or a pet that was missing, they wouldn't have been ripped down. But these are human beings and they're being ripped down. Yes, what do you have to say for that? Right? Anyways, folks, we appreciate you taking the time to watch. You've been watching the Dr. Nasir Shaikh Show. I've been your host, Dr. Nasir, and if you haven't done so already, subscribe to the channel if we've earned it. Like, share, and follow us. You know what to do. Take a look at our other video links above and below. I'll leave you with my final thought, which is, when you're right, and when you're left, you're wrong. Until next time, folks, take care and stay safe.